Hi, okay, chapter 6. We are discussing elasticity. So the aim of the video will be to assist you in your preparation for the chapter. It's additional to what we do in class. So I'm just going to focus on some more technical stuff, do one or two examples, and hopefully this will assist you with your preparation. So elasticity. So in essence, what is elasticity? So we actually want to know how sensitive is the quantity demanded or then supplied as a result of a change in price. For example, the petrol will increase within the next week. Okay, so we want to know how sensitive will the consumers in this case be towards a increase in the price. So what will be, will the change in the percentage change in the price have an influence on the percentage change in demand, in quantity? And that's technically what we want to look at. Another example, toll roads. So there's an increase in the toll amount. We want to know what's the impact going to be on road use? Is consumers, in this case, will it be a big impact? Will they rather then decide to go a different route, or will they pay the money? Will they pay the increase and stay and keep on using the toll route? And especially, it's a ratio that we're going to look at between prices and quantities. But I'll get to that in a bit later. So here's an example. Okay, so in chapter 5 we looked at how demand and supply changed, how equilibrium prices and equilibrium quantity changed as the demand and supply curve adjusted. What we will do at elasticity is we will say, but what is the size or the magnitude of this change? Okay, so here's two examples of supply. So a change in price will have an impact on quantity. But this example, you can clearly see that it's a small change in price and it's a fairly big change in quantity being demanded, both at equilibrium. And the different example, or the second example, is where we have a fairly large change in price, but the change in quantity is not as big. Okay, so that's what we call elasticity. So it has to do a bit of slope, but elasticity tells us how sensitive is either the consumer then or the producer. How sensitive are they if there's a price change? What will be the impact on the quantity? So that's in essence what we are going to have a look at. So what we are looking at in this chapter is 4 types of elasticity. The first one will be price elasticity of demand. So we look at demand and we look at price. How will price influence the quantity? Second one will be income elasticity of demand. Here we specifically look at how changes of household incomes will influence the quantity being demanded. Cross price elasticity of demand. Here we discuss substitute and complementary goods. And lastly, price elasticity of supply. So instead of demand, now we just have discussed what's the implication for the supplier. Okay, so let's have a look at how do we calculate it. How do we determine what's the elasticity? So there's two formulas that we can use, or two methods. The first one is point elasticity. That's if you want to know the elasticity for a specific point on the demand curve itself. Or arc elasticity. Arc elasticity is we are more concerned about the average elasticity between 2 points. So point elasticity will then be, for practical reasons, specifically for one point or a different point on the demand curve itself, where arc elasticity will be between those 2 points. So let's have a look at the calculation of both of these methods and determining the elasticity. So let's start with point elasticity. I'm going to do this one with you, and hopefully when I do it, you guys will also then understand how to calculate the elasticity. So first of all, let's calculate the elasticity at point 1. Okay, so elasticity is a change in quantity divided by a change in price. So in this case, a change in quantity we're working with both of these points, but we're specifically looking at point 1. What's the elasticity there? So what's the change in quantity? So the quantity is at the bottom. So we start at point 1. So it's 50 minus 100. Let's put it there. Equals 50 minus 100. We divide that with a change in price. A change in price would start again at point 1. That's 150, 150 minus 75. And we then multiply this with the specific point on the curve that we want to get the elasticity of. So in that case it will be 0.1. So the price is 150, 150 divided by the quantity is 50. Equals. So when we get that, we get the answer. So that's 50 minus 100. That's minus 50. Sorry, minus 50 divided by 75. And then we multiply that with 150 divided by 50. So that will just be 3. Okay. So then this one will be, I'm just going to move it a bit up. So that will equal minus 6.7 minus 0.67 multiplied by 3, and that will give us an answer of, let me just quickly check it, minus 2. Okay, so the minus in front of the 2 means that we're working with demand. So the minus confirms that we are working with demand and negative slope, and then the 2 is the value of elasticity. So if there's a plus, the plus just means that we're working with supply. We will get to that a bit later, and the 2 will then mean the value of elasticity. So the elasticity in this case, the value is 2. Okay, so the second one we're using arc elasticity, so we will get the elasticity between points 1 and point 2. So in this case, I've already done the calculation. So it's the same as the previous one. So it's minus the change in quantity divided by change in price. So it's minus 50 over 75. And then P1 plus P2, or the sum of P divided by the sum of Q. So the sum of P is 150 plus 75. So it's illustrated there. And the sum of Q is 50 and 100 added together. So we divide those two and then we get 1.5. So it's minus 0.67 multiplied by 1.5. We get an answer of minus 1. Again, minus indicates that we're working with demand, and the 1 is the elasticity. So now the next question will be, what does it mean? What does 2 mean? What does 1 mean? Okay, so there's 5 categories of elasticity. We have perfectly elastic demand, or as we will later see, perfectly elastic supply. Then we have perfect inelastic demand, we have unitary elasticity, relative elasticity, and relative inelasticity. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. Okay, as you'll see here, there's the value. So perfectly elastic will have a infinite number. Okay, so it's an infinite number. I'll show you just now how does, if we draw it on a line or a graph, how does it actually look. Perfectly inelastic, the elasticity, the value will be 0. If it's unitary elastic, it will be 1. Basically what it means is the change in quantity, the percentage change in quantity is exactly the same as the percentage change in price. Meaning that if there's a 1% increase in price, there will also be a 1% increase in quantity demanded. Or if it's 3% at price, it will be 3% at quantity as well. So it's exactly the same. It's unitary, it will be a 1. Then we have relative elasticity. That means the percentage change in quantity is bigger than the percentage change in price. So that generally we get a value bigger than 1. And relative inelasticity, we get a value smaller than 1. And that is generally when the change in price is bigger than the change, it's smaller, so the change in percentage change in quantity is bigger than the percentage change in price. I'll show you with a graph just now what does that mean. So how does it look? Perfectly elastic. So perfectly elastic, here's an example, this is the graph. So you'll see at a specific price, an infinite number of quantity or demand or quantity is asked within the economy, but if you move away from that price, nothing is asked anymore. So it's a specific price and the quantity is unending. So infinite number of possibilities or quantity within the market. That is perfectly elastic. Perfectly inelastic, on the other hand, means that you can actually change the price as much as you like. The demand will be stable. It will still be, the demand will not change at all. So for those of you that like coffee, you will buy coffee irrespective of the price. People with diabetes, they will use insulin irrespective of what the price will be, because they actually require that. Okay, so the price can change, but the quantity will stay exactly the same. A unitary elasticity, okay, so the same percentage change in price will be the exact same percentage change in quantity, so those two are the same, so it's 10%, 10%, 5% and 5%, it will always be 1, so the value will always be 1. Relative elastic, so that means the percentage change in price is relatively smaller than the percentage change in quantity. Or, explained differently, a small change in price will have a big change, percentage change in the quantity being demanded or supplied. Relative inelasticity means that a big change in prices will have a relatively smaller impact or change in price, change in quantity. So the change in price is bigger than the change in quantity. So here we have a relatively inelastic. Okay, so various goods and services will be elastic and inelastic. Inelasticity is generally your basic good stuff. Your basic food stuff, bread, milk, maize meal, stuff that you actually require. So irrespective if the price goes up, you still buy it because you require it. If it's more elastic, it's more luxurious type of goods. Cars, for example, refrigerators, television, computers. If the price just goes up a little bit, you are more reluctant to buy it, so there's a big change in the quantity being demanded by the consumers or the market itself. Okay, so that's the main difference between the two. Again, lastly, in this section, I just want to quickly give you an indication of a slope. So sometimes what we can do is we can give you a slope instead of a change in quantity over a change in price. So actually what you will see is a change in quantity divided by a change in price is an inverse of the slope. Exactly, it's the inverse of the slope. So that is an inverse of the slope. So if we give you the inverse, if we give you the slope of a specific demand curve, how do you calculate the elasticity? You just say 1 divided by the slope. So that's the inverse of the slope. Okay, so what's the slope? A slope is a change in price divided by a change in quantity. So you'll see this part here of the elasticity, it's just the inverse thereof. So it's, instead of price and quantity, we now have the change in quantity and price. So if it happens that we ask you that we just give you the slope, then you know it's the inverse, and for the inverse you actually use 1 divided by the slope and then multiply it by the specific point that you require.